back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. For today's video, I grabbed some items out of my stash and made them over using a beautiful decoupage paper by Redesign with Prima, along with some gorgeous colors from DIY Paint. And I love how the little vignette that I created with them turned out. I hope you do too. And without further ado, let's get to today's projects. These are the projects that I'm going to be making over for today's video. I used the decoupage paper called Vintage Wallpaper by Redesign with Prima as my inspiration and decided on weathered wood and crinoline by DIY for my paint colors. Can't wait to get started. Let's see how everything turns out. My first project are these two pillar holders. I picked these up quite a while ago at a Goodwill, and they've been sitting in my stash ever since. Very first thing I did was remove that little pokey thing from the top of both of them. And then I always like to take a piece of 80 grit sandpaper and just go over it to make sure there aren't any sharp edges left behind. Then it was time to start painting, and for these I really wanted all of my pieces to coordinate well. So I decided to start by painting these weathered wood as a base coat so that I could go over them with the crinoline and distress back to the weathered wood rather than any other color. So I gave them each 2 coats of weathered wood paint. And when I'm painting pillar holders like this, I always like to kind of go around the pillar holder with my brush so that all my brush strokes go in the same direction, so that when I wax, it kind of picks up that little bit of texture. Then I took them outside and gave them each a good coat of Rustoleum's clear matte spray to seal that weathered wood. And this will help so that when I distress the crinoline, I don't accidentally reactivate that weathered wood and wipe that off with the crinoline. Once that was done, it's time to move on to painting the crinoline on. And it did take 2.5, I would say, coats of paint to cover this dark color. For the most part, since the paint is so highly pigmented, it went on with the second coat just fine. There were only a couple of spots that I had to go over a third time. Once that was done and my paint was dry, again, it was time to move on to distressing these guys. Now, I kind of made the decision that I wanted a lot of that weathered wood to show through because I had gone through all the extra effort to actually paint these a base coat rather than just take them out and spray paint them. So I did a lot of super heavy distressing. If you don't like distressing at all, you can absolutely skip this step completely. But like I said, I really wanted quite a bit of that weathered wood poking through the crinoline. So that was the look I was going for, and that's what I did. Just using a damp shop towel and washing back some of that crinoline paint. Now, the great thing about that weathered wood being sealed underneath is, like I said before, I didn't actually reactivate or remove any of it when I did that step. The final step is sealing the paint. And as I've said in previous videos, the DIY paint is porous, it is clay-based, and it can be reactivated with water. So you always want to make sure and seal your paint. For these, I decided to go with wax, and I am starting off with a layer of DIY's clear wax, just brushing that on with a soft bristle brush, and then going over it with a shop towel to remove any excess. So I do the same technique to both of the pillar holders, and then I move on to dark wax. Now, I really wanted to use the dark wax to give these a nice aged patina and just warm up that crinoline paint a little bit more. So I am thinning it out and using it almost like a glaze with some mineral spirits. So I just kind of tap my brush into the mineral spirits and then tap it into the dark wax until I get the consistency that I want, and then paint it on. And I work my way from the bottom to the top of the pillar holder, just waxing it in sections and then wiping back the excess with my shop towel as I go. I'm happy with how these guys turned out, and I really love how they look with the rest of the vignette. For project 2, I am making over this set of 4 little plaques that have flowers on them. Now, these have been in my stash for quite some time. I knew when I bought them I was going to have to paint them because somebody in their infinite wisdom had already painted one of these poor flowers black, and they had done a terrible job at it. So they desperately needed a makeover. So I'm starting with weathered wood as my base coat on these, and I am giving all 4 of them 2 coats of the weathered wood paint, letting it dry in between each coat, and then also painting the back because, as you can see there, that black paint that whoever used bled around the back of these as well. Now, just as a quick reminder, you can purchase any of the paint and products that I'm using in this video through my website at www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com, and that website is listed in the description box below as well. Now you can see here I'm using my mister bottle to help thin out the paint just a little bit. That helps get it into all the little nooks and crannies and grooves in these and made it just a little bit easier to get them finished. Then I went ahead and sealed the weathered wood paint with some Rustoleum clear matte spray, both top and bottom. And then it's on to my final color, which is DIY's Crinoline. So I did have to go over these with 2 coats of paint, and I only used the crinoline on the front of these. I left the back of them weathered wood, and I did stipple my paint some. So just kind of took my stiff bristle brush and gave them a tapping motion so that it added a little bit of texture to that paint and alleviated any brushstroke marks. Then it was on to distressing, and so I grabbed a damp shop towel and just rubbed that over all of the raised areas in these to bring back some of that beautiful weathered wood color from underneath. Once I was finished with the distressing and the paint was dry again, it was on to sealing my paint. And for these, I am also using clear wax followed by dark wax. So this is me just putting that coat of clear wax on with my soft bristle brush, just making sure to work it into all of the little grooves in these pieces, and then wiping back the excess with a shop towel. I did turn them over and make sure that they were nice and clean on the back, used a little bit of mineral spirits, being careful not to go through the Rustoleum clear matte spray, but just wanted to make sure they looked good when they were finished. Then I flipped them back over and went over them with my dark wax, just using a small brush. I did dip it in a little bit of mineral spirits to kind of thin that dark wax out and make it a little easier to work into all of the little crevices in these pieces. And once I was done with that and I had wiped back the excess, I went over it a second time in places with just some of the thick dark wax on my brush and really worked it down into some of the raised areas and some of the little detail in these pieces to really make those stand out and add some shadowing effect to these pieces. I also kind of went into the corners a little bit just to make those look a little bit more grungy and aged as well. That's one of the things I love about the dark wax is that you can apply many layers to really darken things up if that's the look that you're going for. I love how these little plaques came out. What do you guys think? Project 3 is this cute little cabinet that I picked up on our most recent junk run, and it had this little painted flower on the front, so I went ahead and sanded that off as best I could with some 120 grit sandpaper just to make sure that it didn't stand up out of the paint when I went ahead and painted it. Then I moved on to painting the piece, and I am leaving the very front little panel for now, but I'm painting all of the rest of it with weathered wood inside and outside. So it did take me a little bit of time to get 2 good even coats of the weathered wood on this piece, and then I was very careful going around this little front panel because I knew that that is where I wanted my decoupage paper. Once both coats of the weathered wood were completely dry, I went ahead and painted the front panel of this cabinet with DIY's Crinoline. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm going to be putting decoupage paper down. And although it's not necessary to have a white or light colored background underneath your paper, it really does help make the image stand out better and be more true to its original colors. Then I decided I wanted to do a little bit of distressing, and I also kind of wanted to smooth some of the brushstroke marks in this cabinet. So I grabbed my 220 grit sandpaper and just went over everything with a light sand and did a little bit of distressing. Nothing too major, but I did bring a little bit of that white color from underneath out through that weathered wood. Once that was done and I washed it back up again, I wanted something more on the sides of this. So I grabbed my Redesign with Prima stamp set called Linear Floral. I laid out 3 of the flowers and then I picked them up with this backing mat, just kind of laid them down and then stuck them on, flipped that over, and then I inked up my stamp with some white ink. Flipped that back over, laid it back down, and then very carefully just holding that backing piece down with one hand, went over all the stamps with the other, making sure that I had nice crisp images before I removed the stamps. And I did these on both sides of the little cabinet, and I switched the direction of the flowers on the other side so they were all kind of pointing into the same area. Once they were done and dry, I did go over them with some spray coat just to keep them from smudging or smearing when I went over the entire piece with Big Top. The ink that I used wasn't permanent ink, and so it probably would have smeared when I went over it with the Big Top. So that was just kind of a precautionary step. And then I went over the rest of the piece, all of it, with DIY's Big Top, inside and outside, just sealing all of that paint with that Big Top. I love Big Top. It's a great sealer. It does leave a little bit of a sheen, but it's nothing too major. Then I measured my area on the front of the cabinet for my decoupage paper and used my cutter so that I got a nice straight line to cut that piece out. Always measure twice and then you only have to cut once, right? That's how it's supposed to go. Thankfully, my piece was exactly the size I needed it. And then when I laid it down, I decided I really didn't like the whiteness of the stamps. So it was back to repainting over the stamps with 2 coats of weathered wood. And for this time around, I decided I wanted a more subtle effect. So I am using what's called Versamark on these stamps. And I absolutely love the look that this gave the cabinet. And so I went ahead and did the other side with the same effect as well. Then it was on to my decoupage paper, and I am using the medium called Liquid Patina for this by DIY. So I'm laying down a thin, even coat of the Liquid Patina just right at the top. Then I laid down the top strip of that paper, smoothed it into the patina, made sure it was adhered down, lifted the bottom portion, and then added the Liquid Patina all the way to the bottom of the door. Then I laid my fabric back down, smoothed it out, made sure everything was lined up correctly, and went over the entire piece of the decoupage paper with one more good even coat of the patina. Lastly, I sealed the sides of the piece. I started with the Rustoleum clear matte spray, and then I did go over that with some Big Top. And then this little cabinet is finally done, and I absolutely love the result. guys think of my projects for today. I hope you liked them and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then don't forget to comment below and let me know which of the projects from today's video your favorite was. Also, just a reminder, any of the products that you saw me use on today's video, other than the decoupage paper, I am out of that one. It's actually out of stock online as well, but I do have one on my website called Marigold, which is pretty close, and they can be purchased along with the DIY paints, or recycled decoupage paper, other redesign products, and also Sweet Pickins melt paint at www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. It's also listed in the description box below. For Friday's video, I am not sure exactly what I'm doing yet, but I can guarantee it will be pulling more items out of my stash in my kitchen and giving them makeovers and getting them out onto my floor. So I really am going to stick with my goal for January to not do any thrifting and instead really concentrate on trying to get more floor space clear in my poor overstocked kitchen. So stay tuned for Friday's video. I hope you'll join me then. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and I will see you then. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.